and also is basically the star, is also a director whose name is Gerardo Naranjo, who did he's done 2 features that have been released. One called Drama Mex, and most recently Voix Latar, which I think will be coming out in a few weeks. Well, IFC already put it out in theaters, but I think it'll be coming out on DVD soon. And whose work? So Gerardo and I met each other at AFI, which brought me out here about 10 years ago to study narrative films. We both started making our first feature while we were going to school, and we kind of we in the process of making that first film, we kind of got very destroyed, I guess, which probably happens to everybody with their first feature film. But we both kind of wound up in a similar situation where it was hard to kind of get the strength and the will up to make another film. We just kind of felt like it had left like a trail of a lot of broken friendships and broken hearts and things. So it was a painful situation. I actually finished the film. He never finished his film, but he did have a screening of it at Cine Vegas in Las Vegas, and I went out there with the idea that kind of a support, but also with the idea that maybe together, since we'd always talked about AFI making something together, that we could kind of pull each other out of this however we were feeling. And so that's what I did. I met him out in Vegas. We had this idea that we'd start writing for about the 10 days or so that he had, that maybe the festival was going on. After about 2 days, we realized that the idea of writing in like hotel rooms, which the windows don't open up, was like not going to happen. So we wound up going on a road trip to Flagstaff, is where we stopped when we checked into a motel, and we wrote this thing over the next bunch of days, and we kind of had a great time writing. We had like a very it was something that we needed to do for sure. And Gerardo was somebody, that we had a mutual appreciation of certain films, but he introduced me to Kaurismäki and Leo Carax and these people that wound up also having a strong, that I wound up having a very strong love for. And in some ways, when we were writing, we kind of figured out a way we thought of this thing as a thank you to all these movies that we kind of bonded on and connected with, and hopefully we could do something else with and kind of continue the conversation with. And then I think at the last day of writing, we made a pact that we'd meet back in Los Angeles in 2 months, and we'd shoot this film, no matter what. We just, for however we could do it, the smallest, and we already came up with, we'll shoot it because that will be much easier, and we'll do the art department, we'll do everything that we can. And at the last bit, we just decided, all right, we'll act in this thing because it'd be less mouths to feed, and also we knew who these characters that we were writing for. So it wasn't that we were so much dying to be actors, but we knew that this was the only way that we could make it. And then I wound up going back to LA, and he went back to Mexico City, where he lives. And we had written the lead character for Diaz, my girlfriend, and I gave that to her, and we started pulling this thing together. I put ads and Craigslist, and because the kids that I came out with AFI had already started getting paid real money for their films by that point, so to ask them to do another favor after your first feature, we just didn't feel possible or correct. We didn't want anybody kind of just doing this thing for us. And we were able to find really some very hungry people on Craigslist, on Mandy, that had one person who had just moved here and had some cinematography experience that could kind of help as an AC. And then another person who had just who loved movies, and we taught him how here's a boom, and we just and they both showed up and they were there, and we shot this thing. Oh yeah, and then the last thing was that Gerardo was going to be taking care of getting some 16mm film that he figured he thought he could get from the film school. And then that fell through, but we started kind of pulling everything together, and I was able to get a lot of favors from AFI and from the studios here, from Universal, for giving us wardrobe and props and all these things. Like everybody was, you know, like I feel like this film only exists because of the trickle from the industry here, and you know, it's well, anyway, the last thing was that Gerardo wound up, the 16mm couldn't come through, but he did wind up knowing somebody that had been treated wrongly on the set of Troy and had taken about 4.5 hours of 35mm film. So it had been sitting in the sun for about a year, baking, and then Gerardo leaves me this message, and there's a little QuickTime thing on my email, and it's him standing in these boxes of 35, and we drove to Tijuana, and we picked up all these boxes, Mark Troy, and we started shooting the next day, basically, and we got an Arri BL3, everything we got for incredibly, like, just so super cheap, and we actually wound up getting somebody from AFI to a cinematographer that could just hold the camera was so much heavier than me and Gerardo ever knew, you know, that, you know, it was the first time really for me touching 35. And we shot this over 13 days, you know, going straight through, like, you know, long days, between 12 to 16-hour days. And it definitely, like, it's easy to be nostalgic about it, but it was, you know, it was, of course, a painful, but like the best experience, absolutely the best experience. And so I hope you enjoy. And also, the reason the world is on this thing is because I think my dad had just transferred it to digital, and he had sent it to me. So when Gerardo showed up and we started kind of figuring out how we're going to do this thing, we started watching. There's a bunch of short. The world. It was one of the things that we watched pretty much every morning to kind of remind us that we could do something, and gave us the energy, you know, that we thought we could do something good. So that's why the world is there. You want to say anything about the...
Please, and thank you. And here's Ken Jacobs.
Articulate kid. Jack Smith and I were friends starting by 1955, 54. And at some point I was very amused by Jack. He wasn't a performer, he was at the time, he was a photographer, and this is Lower Manhattan. And he had just begun making these beautiful photographs. He had made a movie when he was a teenager, an 8 millimeter, and he had begun making a movie before we met, but it was very, very bad, very bad. And but I really, he was like 6'2" and very, very, very funny. And I said, let's do some shooting with you. And I began shooting him, but in very, very carefully controlled ways, you know, very artistic, and it was no good. And one day, I was staying at his place on Reed Street, downtown Manhattan, and some friends came over. I had 2 rolls of film, 6 minutes of film, less than that actually, and shot the first roll and a half in something we call I call it the Saturday afternoon blood sacrifice. You know, Saturday afternoon blood. You know, it's a movie, right? You go to the movies on Saturday afternoon and you see blood sacrifice. And so that was fun, very quick, very off the cuff. And the next day there was half a roll of film left, and you know, I said, Jack, let's shoot the rest of it. And so we went out on this space alongside his loft, and it was 50 feet of film. Everything I shot is here. Okay, there's nothing cut, and also everything is being shown the way it was cut, the way it was shot, because it was very important to me at the time to make a kind of spontaneous, unedited, immediate film. Whatever was done wrong would be left in. You know, it's part of the aesthetic. And then we got the film back and looked at it and fell off, was sitting on this little couch watching it and just fell off, rolling on the floor. And this was the way to proceed. This was the way to go from now on. Quick, spontaneous, and very soon after I began this long film called Star Spangled Death, which allowed me to destroy capitalism, which I'm sure you're very grateful for. In putting together these short works, the last one appears as a third piece over here, which is an invitation to a TV program which I only realized was a quiz show when I got to the studio. And eventually it was on TV, and I filmed it off a little like fishbowl of a TV set that I had. And I mentioned at the time that to the MC that I'm thinking of, or I'm planning on having this as part of a long film called Star Spangled Death. And when I say this, you will see what happens on the TV channel. And then the last piece is 1961. And so you're seeing really just about the first thing I shot of Jack, and the last thing I shot of Jack. And we tried to raise money and could not, as the film tells you. And so all you get is this fragment, but it's nice.
Tomorrow.
Thank you. Oh yeah, tomorrow. In '69, I think it was '68, I made Tom the Fly Per Son. I had begun teaching, and I had heard about these paper prints at the Library of Congress. Paper prints, because up till 1912, in order to secure a patent on a film, people left literally a paper copy, a roll of paper. And these things stayed on shelves and were forgotten. And then what I heard was sometime in the early 50s, a detective somehow got involved with it and found these things, and this guy began to put them back on film, to rephotograph them and put them back on film and let them get out in the world. And I read about that in the Times, and then when I was teaching, I had this thing called a budget. You could rent films, so I could see whatever I wanted to. And I rented a few of these things. Most of them were very bad, but this one was amazing. Okay, it was just people running around the stage. Something with a pig. I never saw the pig, but I just liked this high velocity confusion of the movie, and I made an illegal print of the film, and Flo and I would look at it and stare at it, and friends came over, and then I began performing live for friends, okay, playing with the film on a projector that could go fast, slow, backwards and forwards. And one time I did it, and this friend came over to me after I was through, and I was really knocked out. I was leaning against a wall, and he said, "Oh, Ken, that was great." And I said, "Yeah, I'm thinking of filming it, thinking of putting it on film." And he did this kind of thing. He said, like this. He said, "Do it," and that worked. And for the next year and a half or so, we worked on that film. And okay, so that was 1969, and I revised it again in '71, and then this invention called digital video happened. Ooh. And I became interested in going back to this material, this original, like 10 minutes short, and working with it again with video. And I made a piece called Return to the Scene of the Crime, another long movie. Return to the Scene of the Crime. You know, the pig is stolen in Tom the Fly Per Son. Hey.
Hey.
And after making Return to the Scene of the Crime, it occurred to me, what crazier thing could I do? What further crazier thing could I do? How about a 3D version of this movie? How about making it in 3D? Impossible, right? Okay, when was the film made? Originally? 1905. Okay, we're going to do it in 3D. So that's what we'll show tomorrow night. Do not expect people to be soaring through space, but it's definitely 3D. Okay, thank you.
Thank you both very much.